PaR, processes as requirements. Bring processes to the teams in an agile, scalable and systematic way. A presentation for the Rework Conference 2020 in Berlin. My name is Ralf Bürger. I have done a lot of software development in the past, but nowadays I focus on designing processes as requirements, also for platform-based product development. If you want to know more about me, check the website ralfbürger.de. If you want to know more about PaR, check the website processesasrequirements.info. So what is it about? An exoskeleton is like a shell around you that helps you to move. So standards and processes should be such an exoskeleton. They should help the teams in the projects to move safely and efficiently through the storms of the project. So it should not be some extra work, something additional that is not really needed. But what is the reality? Often we see that processes grow excessively over time. They get bigger and bigger and bigger. They get more and more details, more and more formal. And finally, maybe they are not really an exoskeleton anymore, but rather a heavy backpack that the projects have to carry additionally. And then it's maybe something like overhead, considered from the projects as something additional. That's not really good. It should not be like that. So when the teams start considering your processes being kind of overhead and not really a help that supports them moving through the project, then something is really wrong. We know from the past how to work on requirements specifications and how to gather requirements, and we have done that for a long time. And all this describes what we should do in the project. It's the technical and functional requirements that tell us what the project should be, what the product should be. And we break them down in system requirements, following a bidirectional traceability to check for coverage. We are used to do all this. But how do we treat how we work in the project? When standards and processes tell us how to work because they are reuse of best practices, why don't we treat those standards and processes as what they are, requirements to the projects that tell us how we should work, how the what should be done? When processes are reuse of best practices and the processes are written as requirements, we also can reuse these processes much more efficiently because we can reuse them as requirement sets like we do with product requirements, functional, technical requirement sets. We are used to do that. And we can do that in the same tool. So we can combine our process requirements with our product requirements and build kind of packages, or in an agile way, kind of epics. And we can work them off package for package in a combined way of what we should do and how we should do it. The diagram on the right shows a picture from a whiteboard, and we see the regulatory standards coming from the top, regulatory standards like ISO definitions, and we can write them down as requirements. And then we can create our corporate standard process also in form of requirements, activities written as requirements. And they can be related to the regulatory standards so that we already see how good the coverage may be in a project. We then can reuse those corporate standard requirements into the project. And we instantly can work within the project in the requirements. So we don't work along a process, we don't look at the process, we are working in the process. We are really applying it. And we also can combine it with the functional and technical requirements. So we can create those requirements from our project, or we can reuse those requirements in the project, or we can break them down in the project. And we also can learn from the projects and bring back those requirements into the standard by synchronization. So we can synchronize the originally corporate process requirements with what we did from it in the project. And we always see the regulatory standards behind, so we always can look them up. So it's all like traceability, like we are used to it from standard product requirements, but now also applying it for the processes. And this is the main idea of PaR. In the last years, I have done a lot of coaching for really complex projects, and I discovered some challenges that also might be your challenges. And the main one is that we should design processes in a flexible way so that we can suit all different kinds of projects that we have in our company. So the corporate processes should be applied to local projects, to international projects, to small projects, to large projects, to development projects, or maybe product projects, or just product improvement projects. So it's really difficult to design processes in such a flexible way when you type them down as PDF documents, or when you design them as flowcharts in diagrams. Then it's really difficult to tailor them to the dedicated needs of the projects. This becomes much easier when you design processes as requirements, because then each process and sub-process is a set of requirements that can be reused when it's needed in the project and also how it's needed in the project. And you can instantly follow this and can see this and can also check for coverage and check for compliance and check for improvements that you maybe can synchronize back into your standard. Because it's just requirements with the bidirectional traceability, so we can do everything that we are used to do with requirements now in the processes. And that really increases the flexibility that we also need in the projects and in the companies. The next challenge is to comply to the regulatory standards. And this is really very important, because this finally ensures that we don't value technology or profit over the life of our users. Also, when we have a callback from the market in a couple of years, it's very important to have the sustainability that is guaranteed when we follow the regulatory standards. And when you check those regulatory standards, you see that they typically are already written as kind of requirements. So when we write them down as requirements and we add traceability to our development processes, we can always check whether our development processes comply to the regulatory standards and cover all the requirements that are given there. And when we reuse those development processes as requirements into the projects, it's pretty easy to check for coverage and for compliance in the projects. And again, this is very, very important, and we really should do that. As I already said, I consider processes being reuse of best practices. So it's also about a learning culture. We can reuse the best practices from our regulatory requirements, so from our ISO standards, for example, because they in fact gathered all the best practices around the world to make them a standard. So it's a good idea to check them and to reuse them in the projects. But also within our company, we do a lot of learning. We gain experience from project to project, and we should learn how to bring these experiences into the standards to reuse them into the next projects. This is very important, and a good learning culture really considers what the teams are doing and what the teams are learning. So we should do it like we do it with a product platform, where we improve a product from project to project and synchronize the requirements back into the product platform requirements. We can do it similar with the processes, like improving the processes in the projects and bringing those improvements back into the process platform. So when we unite the process requirements and the product requirements, we can instantly improve our learning culture and our learning corporate culture, and improve the processes as well as the products from project to project in a systematical fashion. And also this is very important and a challenge that we really should take in each company. And in addition, this bidirectional traceability not only ensures compliance, but it also enables measuring coverage in a pretty easy way. So when we think about KPIs or some progresses or some reportings, it's much easier when we do the processes as requirements, because with your tooling in the bidirectional traceability of the related requirements, you can instantly, continuously, easily check for coverage which requirements have been satisfied and which not. We are used to that from the product requirements, and we can do the same with the process requirements. But monitoring a project is not only about coverage. It's more about maturity in the project and gaining maturity of the product that we develop during the project. And measuring the progress in maturity is much more than checking for consumed time or for wasted money. And measuring maturity, real maturity, is really difficult, but it becomes more simple when we design the processes as requirements, because we can easily check about the status, about related work products, and we get a much more intrinsic and holistic view on the progress of the project, instead of just looking at some Microsoft project Gantt charts, or just checking for coverage of requirements, or just doing reviews from time to time. We get a more holistic intrinsic picture. We now see the overview map of PaRIS, the PaR information system. We will see a more detailed diagram later on, and we already saw a more simplified diagram from the whiteboard in the previous slide. So what we see here is somehow the same picture as we already described. At the top, we see the things that will be applied in a project as is. These are the regulatory standards like ISO standards or IEEE standards, or maybe our customer standards that we have to apply. We cannot change this. We have to take it as it is. Also, the standard terms, abbreviations, and definitions that make the same language for all people in the company should be used as given. Also, when we have some standard algorithms or apply some standard tooling, we should apply the how-to manuals that describe the best practices for these tools and algorithms. All this is just applied because we use it as it is. The green ones in the middle, the three ones, are our corporate process requirements, and this is what we really can change because it's within our company. So we can learn and we can improve this. This is how we work with requirements, how we work on system level, how we work in phases of the project, like requirement phases, sample phases. And this also shows what finally has to be done in the project, so how we work in the project. We also see that we can apply simple templates like maybe just for meeting minutes or determining who the project manager is. This is simple, small, and can also be done in form of requirements. And these templates may become simple documents in our project when we fill those templates. So we reuse the requirements to fill them. And we also can apply requirements for the team building, because we require the process activities to be done by dedicated roles. And those persons who take the roles should have some expertise. And we maybe require that they attended some trainings. And when we describe this in the process and we reuse the process into the project, we also can add the team members that finally take the roles to become actors of the game. So the green ones are the ones that we reuse into the project to fill them, so that they become some living objects, and that we also can improve them and synchronize them maybe back into the standards. When we do this in the project, so when we check how we should work and start filling those requirements, we also relate them to our product requirements that we create out of the project or that we reuse because they have been created before. So the bottom blue ones that we see here are our typical requirements, like needs, which might be market requirements, and the product requirements that define on a high level which features should be in the product that we create, or the system requirements that we derive from the product requirements in a traceable fashion. We don't show the domain requirements here, like for software, hardware, or dedicated product domains, because this is not essential for the PaR approach. We show the tree of the product requirements down there to show that we can merge them with our process requirements within our project so that we get a holistic approach. Around this, we see some screenshots which show maybe a typical dashboard or a tree of process requirements, or maybe a tree of product requirements on the right side. And the most important might be the screenshot at the bottom that shows how such a PaR information system maybe can be implemented in a tool as a relationship diagram. Okay, let's go into a project now and let's check how PaR looks in a typical requirements engineering tool. This is a screenshot where I would like to introduce the orange descriptions first. On the left side, we see the process tree. This is the reused process requirement tree in the project. We have selected one item here, and from this item selection, we see this process activity in the middle, in the top. It's described, we explain what it is, we give some directions what should be done, we can have a status, we can have some estimations and much more. So this is a typical single process activity. For this process activity, in the bottom middle, we see the relations. So we see, for example, relations to the regulatory standards that we see behind the process. So we can look them up, we can look into the standards. This gives a real help for the project. We don't have to read additional documents, we don't have to read additional books. We also see how we can be compliant to the standards when we follow this single process activity. But we can do more. We only see a screenshot here as a part of the screen, and we can have more relations, for example, also to our product requirements, like we discussed before. Then we see on the right side the product tree from our product platform, where we have the requirements for the needs and the product requirements, the system requirements, all our functional technical requirements. And we also can relate them to the process activity, maybe as an input because the requirements have to be analyzed, or maybe as an output because those requirements have to be elicited. So this already shows how we can merge our process activities with our product activities. This is something that we also show in this blue overview picture in the bottom right. It's the same picture as you know from before. We just focus a little bit on the regulatory standards and the corporate process requirements as our process platform, and our needs, product requirements, system requirements as our product platform, and how the project in the middle is somehow the application of both requirements platforms. So we reuse the corporate process into the project, and we also create or reuse the product requirements in the project. Let's go into details. I would like to zoom into different areas of this screenshot to explain more details which are described in blue in this screenshot. We now see the top left corner of the screenshot, and we see that we created a project, in this case to set up a battery management system platform, and we reused our corporate process into this project. And we see also that maybe we did not reuse everything. You can see that from the status of the dedicated requirements, or you can see it by traceability in a dashboard where we measure the coverage of our process in the project. But we also see that something additional maybe has been created, or only some parts have been selected, in this case from the blue dots in this tooling. So we see, for example, that this project added some process parts as a requirement set for platform definition. We also see that we have defined one process requirement as variability. So obtain the needs, like maybe check the market for what needs to be done, is defined in 3 different variants. And it could be obtaining the needs for a new product. It could be just for a product update, or maybe within the platform for platform improvement. And since our project is for setting up a platform, we decided to select the third one. So we decided for the third variant to obtain the needs for the platform improvement. Here you see how we can define process variability within a process platform, and when we reuse it and apply it in a project, we can select which variant we want to apply. This shows how we easily can define flexible processes. This was our first challenge. And in this case, for different types of projects, it could be also different for small projects or for large projects. It depends. But finally, we can define a flexible process and we can reuse it in the projects as we need it. And this is very important. This was our first challenge. We now selected one item from the reused corporate process. And this one item is the process activity that we see in the top middle of the screenshot. In this case, it's for a first project phase, for requirements, for request for quotation. And it says to derive first system requirements from the product requirements. We thought in our corporate process that doing this might be a good idea. So we should do it systematically also. And we give a small explanation here what this means. And then we give the directions how it should be done. You remember processes are somehow descriptions how we should work. And these requirements tell us exactly how we should do it step by step. It already gives a hint to some ISO standard, and we will see that in more detail in the relations in the next step. What we also see is that this process activity has a dedicated status in the project. So the project reuses the process activity and gives additional information. In this case, this process activity is still ongoing in the project. We also could give extra information like how much budget is estimated, how much time is estimated, how much budget is already burned for this process activity, so that we get a better view about maturity. And the relations also could go to dedicated work products so that we do not only see the progress in the project, but also the gaining of maturity in the product that we create in the project. Let's go to the relations that are underneath of this process activity in the screenshot in case of this tool. So now we see that the selected activity item from the corporate process is related to automotive SPICE items from the regulatory standards. And like you see in these small blue frames, it's also related to ISO 26262, which is automotive functional safety. So we see how we comply to our standards when we follow this dedicated process activity. We also can have relations to our work products or to our product requirements from our product platform, and they are beneath of this. This is just an extract of all the relations that we have on this single process activity that we selected here. And we see how we can create such a relation. We simply click on relate items in this case, in this tool, and then we get to a selection from a tree, which is in this case our product platform requirements tree on the right side. So now we move to the right side of the screenshot to see that tree and to see how we can relate this process activity to further requirements from our product platform. So now in the top right of the screenshot, we see a part of the product tree that we defined for our product platform for battery management systems. And what we also see is that we defined variability in our product platform so that we finally can create product variants. For example, we see that the battery shall be chargeable via AC up to X kilowatt, which may be 11, 22, 16.5. This can be done like we did here with alternate requirements, and maybe in another tool, or when you want, you can also do it with a parameter for this requirement, so that in the project you only set the parameter like 11. In this case, we relate it to different requirements and we select a product requirement for our product as a base. So this is reuse of requirements from a product platform into the project. In another situation, or maybe in another activity, we maybe create product requirements from our project. Anyway, at the end, we have a relation between our process activities and our product requirements. And this is how we merge those different platform views in the project to make it a really holistic approach, and also to see how we gain maturity in our product development. And in the bottom right corner of the screenshot, again, we see this small diagram. Like I just explained, we merged the process platform with the product platform. So we reused the corporate process requirements into the project. That was the tree on the left side of the screenshot. And we related to the requirements from our product platform, or we create the requirements in our product platform. And this was the product tree that we just saw in the top right corner of the screenshot. And the relations, again, are in the middle bottom of the screenshot, close to the activity. And we see how our process activity is filled with results and how we work in the process instead of having it somehow aside with the PDF document or some flowcharts or whatever. And when you experience with reusing requirements and synchronizing them, applying bidirectional traceability, you maybe already get a picture of how it works with process requirements. It's exactly the same way like we do it with product requirements. So we already know how to do this. And this again simplifies also improving the processes like we want with a learning culture, so that we can learn from team to team, from project to project, by reusing our experience back into the standard requirements and reusing the standard requirements then again in the next project, with the process as well as with the product. That's how we do it with platforms. We now collected some benefits that we get when we work with PaR, and you already saw that in the challenges and in the solutions that we explained in the beginning, and also in the PaR information system diagram that we showed before. And you also saw in the example screenshot from the tooling how this can work in the project, and how easy it is, how flexible it is, and which benefits we really get. Finally, it really makes it a systematic, holistic, and intrinsic approach, and it's much easier to work with it than we did before. Here we see the detailed PaRIS map, the PaR information system, and we see some more arrows and we see some more descriptions, and it's maybe too much for this introductory explanation. Of course, we will do some more conference presentations and also do some more videos, some more explanations on this. And of course, you find a lot of material on our website, processesasrequirements.info. And you also will find a booklet there, and we are also working on a book that you can buy later on. And I'm looking forward to the discussions with you. And this finally brings us to the end of this presentation. So thanks for watching this video, and thanks for choosing PaR. And please remember, it's under Creative Commons license, so you don't need an extra license. You don't need to pay for it. You just can watch it. You can try it out in your requirements engineering tool. You have the licenses for this tool anyway. So try it out, and if it works, give some feedback, and let's help in our community to improve this approach a little bit further. And I'm really looking forward to get in touch with you. See you. Bye-bye.